the quarterbacks that have the ability to run, you don't want to take that away from them, but it also scares the hell out of you because you can end up like Anthony Richardson did last year with all the different injuries that he had.
I think, though, Anthony Richardson is young enough, and that's probably his best asset. Where, like he was saying, I think the Colts probably use him a lot like Baltimore uses Lamar Jackson, which is we're not going to take away your ability to run, but you're not just a running back, right? We've seen now he's got 2 MVP trophies to show that the guy can throw the football a little bit also. So I do think that you're going to see him used a lot the same way. It's not going to be Patrick Mahomes, which is we don't need you to run. We just need you to escape the rush and then throw behind your
Yeah.
back or sideways or blindfold or whatever it is. I think it's going to be look at option one, look at option two, and then tuck and run, dude, because you might not be Mike Vick or Lamar Jackson yet, but that's what everybody expects you to be. So I don't think you take away his best trait. I think the problem for Anthony Richardson is this. There's a lot of already established, Nick, young AFC quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes is 27 years old. He's been to 4 Super Bowls. Lamar Jackson already has 2 MVPs. Josh Allen's already done a bunch. Look at what CJ Stroud did in just 1 season. So, as good as I think Anthony Richardson is going to be, where can we really slot him right now? If we're talking about current events and not what he can be in a few years, I only think he's like the middle of the pack as far as AFC quarterbacks go.
Yeah, listen, I think that's fair. We also didn't see much of him, but when we did see flashes of greatness, right? And
He's
that
great.
happens a lot with so it's certainly that listen, he exceeded even in the short amount of time he was on the field, he exceeded my expectations. I was concerned that Anthony Richardson was just going to look completely unprepared for the NFL level. He didn't throw the football a lot. We saw at the beginning of his time in Florida, it took him weeks just to even throw a touchdown pass, but he looked much more prepared and ready to go. And obviously, NFL defenses weren't used to. Every running quarterback is different. They have their own techniques and little things they want to do. So, like, you got to learn what they can. There was a little bit more on film now, but because there is still the learning curve that's there, there is the inexperience, and there also is the risk of injury. Again, if I'm looking at season-long props for Anthony Richardson, I would maybe consider taking the over on his rushing yards, 525.5. I would maybe consider taking the over 7.5 rushing touchdowns. That's, by the way, even money to the over. I'm not touching the passing yards. That's 32.50.5. And I probably wouldn't even touch the passing touchdowns at 17.5 just because I haven't seen enough of that yet. But I do know that when a quarterback is a young quarterback that can throw the football, they're going to lean crutch if they need to, and that's running if they don't see something open fast enough to make them comfortable.
If he stays healthy, he hits the overs definitely on the rushing prop, definitely on the rushing touchdown prop. I think he's going to give himself enough opportunities. It's kind of like betting a future prop for Tua. The real question isn't the number, it's does he stay healthy? It's the number of games does he end up playing. So I like a lot of those overs. What do you think the chances are that we get toward the end of the season and we're talking about the AFC South? And as much as everybody thinks it's going to be CJ Stroud conversation, people are actually talking about Anthony Richardson because it seems like the last couple of weeks, I've heard a lot of chatter about this dude, almost like he already had the full season that CJ Stroud had last year.
Well, we saw those, we saw those flashes, and I think people certainly are putting now higher expectations on him because even in that small time, he looked better than what I think most people expected. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. In fact, I even talked about it this offseason. If you're looking for a long shot MVP, it's not crazy to look at Anthony Richardson at 50-1. Now,
Yes, it
am I
is.
saying that
Yes, it is.
it's not, and here's why. Here's why. Because how often have we seen young quarterbacks win an MVP? We saw Mahomes do it. We saw Lamar Jackson do it right off the bat. I mean, those are just recent ones right there. First years as starters right there. Running quarterbacks get an extra advantage because that's another element that defenses have to get used to. Again, every running quarterback is slightly different with their tendencies. So that's another advantage that he has. If Anthony, again, he's 50-1 to win MVP for a reason. There's going to be people like, of course he's not going to win. It's about the odds. It's about the long shot at 50-1. So that's the most important thing here for anybody that would see this and be like, oh, you're crazy for saying. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that you see that potential and that ceiling for early on in the career before you start saying, now you got to develop. Now you got to be able to throw the football more. Like we've seen this pattern before where young quarterbacks have burst onto the scene and won an MVP award. So he fits the bill at least for that conversation. Now, do I think he's going to win it? No, I don't think he's going to win it. There's a lot of really great quarterbacks in this league. But if the Colts go win 11, 12 games this year and Anthony Richardson runs for 14 touchdowns and throws for 3,500 yards, he's going to be in the conversation.
Hey, I appreciate a good value bet, Nick. I ain't mad at you.
Yeah.
And before Lamar won his first MVP, I don't think a lot of people were saying Lamar Jackson's going to end up the most valuable player
Mm-mm.
this season. You could have got about the same odds. But if you're hell-bent, buddy, on getting a 50-1, I'm looking at those odds right now at BetMGM. If you really want a long shot, and that's about where you're sitting, Christian McCaffrey, right? I mean, he's probably the best player on
Yeah.
the best team in the NFC. Caleb Williams, 50-1 odds right now. The only one I wouldn't play at those odds is Kyler Murray. That might as well be 50 million to 1. I think they're going to be pretty bad again.
Oh,
Kyler,
whoa. Hold on a second. Remember. Kyle, remember, it was the last full season that he was healthy. They started off 7-0. They've got a better coaching staff now, a better offense, and Marvin Harrison Jr. there.
there you go.
Again, 50-1. When we say this, it's because of the odds and what things have to align for this to come to fruition. But Kyler Murray has been in the MVP conversation before. Now we're going back to 2021, and then it was Cliff Kingsbury, and they melted down because Cliff Kingsbury couldn't adjust his offense at all, and everybody figured him out. They got a much better team now. They really do, and they actually looked okay in the second half there. So I love McCaffrey, but it's going to be tough because if they're winning, Brock Purdy's likely going to get a lot of the credit. And it's hard, man. It's hard for running backs. As much as I think McCaffrey could have even deserved it last year, they just don't give it to anybody other than quarterbacks anymore. Besides Anthony Richardson, there's Jonathan Taylor, who a couple of years ago was in the MVP conversation, ran for 1,800 yards. Since then, we've had some injuries. We've had a contract dispute. There's been a lot of different things going on. I guess basically the same question for him. How has he looked so far? And do we expect a significant amount of carries from him this year? What is his role going to look like?
Yeah, I think he's in store for a really big year. Chris Ballard said that at the beginning of training camp in his pre-camp press conference. Taylor's in store for, I think, a monster season. Now, is it going to be 1,800 yards? And as you said, flirting with the MVP award a couple years ago? Probably not, because now you have even more weapons within this offense on the outside with Adonai Mitchell, who they drafted. Josh Downs had a really good year last year as a rookie. Michael Pittman Jr. is a high-volume catch receiver. And, again, you've got Anthony Richardson running the football, who might take away, whatever it is, 4 or 5 carries a game away from Jonathan Taylor, just as that threat to always be able to run the football out of the backfield from the quarterback standpoint. But the crazy thing about Jonathan Taylor last year, as you said, up and down season off the field last year, started the season on PUP, then had that dispute with the Colts over the contract and all that saga. But the fact of the matter is that Taylor and Richardson, unbelievably, only played 2 snaps together last year on the game field. That was it, because Taylor came off of PUP in week 5, and that was the game where Richardson got hurt. So a grand total of 2 snaps together for the entire season, and before that, only a handful of practices. So just not a whole lot of run between the two of them in terms of familiarity and getting comfortable with one another. But again, on paper, I think the Colts have probably the best, running back, quarterback, rushing duo in the NFL. And in order for that to really take shape and reach its fullest potential, they got to get more in the passing game, right? You hear all the time where you got to run to, set up the pass. Well, I think in the case of the Colts with Anthony Richardson, they got to be able to throw the ball to be able to run it. I think they need to be a little bit more explosive on the outside, win outside the numbers, win vertically down the field. If they can do that and be just more threats to do that, pose the threat, it's going to lighten the box, and it's really going to help Taylor and Richardson feast on defenses. And then how do you defend the Colts? So expecting a really big year from Jonathan Taylor because of who he's now paired with in the offensive backfield with Anthony Richardson.